in here too, but I'll tell you the ones that come up while I'm right here in class. So I said everything there on page 3. I just like to do it from my head and heart and not read a piece of paper. And most of what's on 4, but let's look at it visually for a moment, because that was a lot to take in. You guys did really good just kind of taking that in. But let's look at page 4 visually and look at that vata, ether, and air. Air is a lot like wind, creating mobile, cold, dry qualities. So as soon as you feel cold or you feel dry, that could be dry lips, dry chapped skin, dry hair, even dry humor. I notice when I get more dry, my humor gets very dry too. And ether is more empty space, creating like light, clear, subtle qualities, like subtly leaving your body or subtly sitting in the background while all this stuff is going on. But, you know, sometimes we go into that subtle kind of etherical place. Vata is of the spiritual body. This is not all negatives. It is going to talk a lot of symptoms and negatives, because those are the things you need to pay attention to. And if you don't read and witness the negative, how are you ever going to switch it over? But I do want to give you those positives. Like Vata is of the spiritual body. They go with the flow. They change quick. They love travel. Love travel. They are amazing, whimsical, easy. Who knows where they're going to land, but it's going to be good. They can like smell something exciting happening in the air, you know what I mean? And they read energy like nobody's business. I mean, they know who's angry, who's sad, who's happy. They're all about being able to be in the energetics of the world. The issue for Vata maybe would be in that energetics, when they get too depleted, too dry, too underweight, their nerves are exposed. So then they're kind of like, oh my God, I have to go in Whole Foods. you know what I mean? Or like, oh God, I gotta drive somewhere. You know, so travel no longer is fun, and going in public and being around energy becomes very daunting for them, because they are energetically, but they're too thin. They're, you know, and so their nerves are more exposed. So the number one thing for Vata is gonna be hydration. The secondary thing for them is going to be nervines. They need nerve support. And then they also need hydration picture. And I'll go into what that means a little bit after I tell you more. And then here it says releasing gaseous waste. It rules the taste of astringent. So this is why too much raw isn't good. Anything raw is more astringent. Other people, the other two, you know, types of constitutions totally need raw, you know. But anxiety, indecision, fear, these are some primaries. There's actually it's on the next page. I'll go over kind of the 5 primary emotions a little more clearly. And then there's some foods they should really watch out for, like they have very high metabolism. So since their metabolism is high, they don't need things that are like metabolizing specific, like kombucha or too much fermentation, you know. And this is an interesting thing, because, you know, Vata's really about taking care of themselves. Like if I tell Vata to do a teaspoon of ashwagandha, which is really awesome for them, the whole, you know, it's like standard for Vata ashwagandha, they might even scrape off that teaspoon and like go for the, like, she said a teaspoon. You know, whereas I'm a Pitta Kapha, so I might be like this much today and a little less tomorrow. I'm like, whatever. But Vatas will be like, you said a teaspoon, I did a teaspoon. So I often like to break that habit, because that's actually a rigid habit, showing they're cold and dry and want to do it just right. So they'll go into like, raw's right, so I should do raw. You know what I mean? Or alkaline. Everyone's eating alkaline, I need to eat alkaline. And I'm like, well, acidic isn't bad if you're not eating processed acidic food, which nobody needs. So if you ate whole food, some people need those warming, sparky foods. Some people need tomatoes. There's tons of vitamin C and folic acid in there. If you have low blood pressure, cold, Vata, you actually need those. You know what I mean? So every food goes, it's about who are you and when are you doing it. But if we took out acidic processed food from the picture altogether, now we just have whole foods that are all edible, and all those edible foods are good for somebody at some time, you know? So there's a little more play in that. But this would be an idea where, you know, Vata can get a little fixed, like, this is the way to be, so I'm gonna do it, but it might be hurting them. So I like to help them to be like, I want you to take a half a teaspoon tomorrow, and a teaspoon the next day, and a 1.5 the next day, and they're like, no, just tell me how much. And I'm like, actually, I want you to decide, because they have amazing instincts. Like if Vata just said, this much today, they know. You know, Pitta has a little bit more ambitious. They're kind of a more is better. So I'm gonna be like, only 2 teaspoons, please, please, you know, because they'll be like, if she said 2, I should do 6. So they've got a whole nother thing going on, you know what I mean? Just normal characteristics that make up who we are and how we tick. But Vata, I like to give them like, how do you beat to your own drum? How do you trust your own instincts? Like, you know, they're the ones who like go by an alley and they're like, I ain't going down that road. And they're probably right. The energy was wrong, that's enough. And other times they're like, no problem, let's go. So they have amazing spiritual decision making if they really let themselves have the you know, give themselves permission to do it. You know, I make the joke sometimes about Vata where, you know, Pitta comes into the room and says, come on, let's go. And they're all, okay. And then a Kapha comes in the room and says, come on, let's sit down. Okay. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, yeah, but what do you want to do? You know, what do you want to do? And sometimes they're so change and flexible, they really don't care. I had to learn this from my husband, who is Vata subtle. You know, it's like when he would say, I'd be like, you know, what do you want for dinner? He's like, whatever. You know, it's your turn to cook, so whatever you want to do. You know what I mean? And I'm like, no, what do you want? You know, like, you know, if he's like, what do you want? I'm probably going to be like, what do I want? I'm going to tell you what I want. You know what I mean? And I got an idea, you know? But and I just kind of was like, wow, it's like, is that a communication flaw or what? I mean, we're together 21 years now. But in the early days, I was like, you really don't care what's for dinner? I think you're not communicating. And I had to learn, no, that's not true. Because he actually tells me when he wants something specific. He really is that flexible. So that's the beauty of Vata. So much flexibility. They need lots of nutritives. Raw sesame oil is as raw as it gets. Raw oils, everybody gets raw oils. But sesame, because they need the warmth, they need the richness. And they do really good with touching their body every day. So one of the #1 self-care tools for Vata is Abhyanga. And Abhyanga means daily oilination. So it's starting at the feet, so you're working towards the lymph and the heart flow. So starting at the feet, working all the way up, arm up, other foot up, arm up, and then even the neck, and even rubbing oil in their ears, and even rubbing it in on their gums, even a little bit into their nostrils. They're dry and they're cold. So oil is just like so grounding and nourishing. You don't want to put so much oil on you that you can't get dressed and you're like, this is so high maintenance. I definitely have people come back and they're like, that oil's high maintenance. And I'm like, are you doing a tiny bit and rubbing it in? And they're like, oh no, I was like putting a whole bunch on me waiting. I'm like, oh yeah, do that once a week. You know, once a week, that's awesome, you know. But you want to use just enough that you're kind of getting it to drive in, and you want to use enough that you have to rub it in because, you know, Vatas get dry. So they really do need to kind of work the muscle off the bone and make sure they're opening up their cell beds so that things can be received. Water, oil, and sometimes even love. Vatas can get so dry and cold that they kind of shut down and get a little bit, you know, kind of worried about sharing space. And then I'll be like, you need nourishment. And they're kind of like, that sounds horrible. You know, and I'm like, wow, okay, let's start working on that. Because, you know, it'd be really nice to be able to feel warm and safe and juicy, you know. Then we have Pitta, fire and water. And here we have this assimilation. So fire is action. Let's remember that's the primary idea of Pitta, really taking action. So it's all about inflammation, hot, sharp qualities. Sharp mind, sharp tongue. They are of the intellect. They are of the intellect. So they're very much about, like, if they figure out how it works, that's how they're going to do it because it works. They're also going to work on efficiency and shorter timelines and just really making sure they get that down. Now that means that they get very fixed in perfection, and then they're very dissatisfied because it doesn't exist. So they do get that challenge of kind of like, man, I thought I was doing everything just right. And in actuality, you know, there was a flow. So sometimes Pittas will get very mind-oriented, whether that be ambitious or opinionated or just like so dang focused on their project, you just kind of can't get them to stop and even eat, you know, or drink water, you know. But healthy Pitta, focus, intellect, A to Z. You need someone to help you get a project done, do not call a kapha. Call your Pitta friend. Call your Pitta. You don't call Pitta necessarily for like, just the like, I want to have somebody listen and cry on their shoulder and just listen. That's not Pitta. That's where you go to kapha. But if you really want to experience Pitta and it's divine, let me help you. They're solution oriented. They've got the longevity. They love a project. They can totally handle high stress situations, even though they don't notice their stress too, but they do really well in those environments, you know? So that's where they really shine. I think it's really important to even have more than one Pitta in a project. If you have a big project or a big community, you have one primary Pitta, you have one primary person making all the decisions, and it's not actually good for that person's health, but it also will end up in that like hierarchy, upper, you know, situation. So actually it's important to find how do Pittas work together to make the dream team work. You know, one Pitta's one opinion, it's going to be their way, and they're also going to get stressed because if anyone's going to say, I'll do it, forget it, I'll do it, as they're frustrated, whatever, just step aside, you know. But they are very like, you know, they know what they know. So, you know, something just to think about. But if you have healthy Pittas and mature Pittas who know that 3 people in a big project that have that drive could get so much more done, where one person is going to take 5 years, 3 people it might take 3 years. So, you know, we talk about the mature Pitta, you know, the Pitta that wants to play with other Pittas. But sometimes you'll get 2, you know, fire and fire make what? More fire. So that'll be the issue, you know, with that leadership role. And they're just really good at leading. But, you know, usually in a big project, there's way more than one thing to lead. So you might as well have multiple people kind of taking that, you know, holding that. And then it's really healthy and fun. What else would I say about Pitta? I talked about the liquefaction qualities. Emotional. They're hot-headed. You know, like Vata's kind of, you know, nervous and affected by other people's energy. Pitta is a little bit more out there. They're sharp-tongued. You know, the primary emotion is anger, or even a pre-emotion would be the word frustration. So they do get irritated and frustrated and impatient. You know, so those would be the main things for Pitta that really kind of put the pressure on. And food. So pungent is not their friend. They're already pungent-related people. So, you know, they have to watch the amount of meat they eat. The harder they work their body, the more they might really need that protein sustainability. But, you know, if they're just like working with their head all day, the last thing they need is to, you know, go and eat a burger, because that's just like fire and muscle and then eating a bunch more fire, you know. So that's why Vata actually, in Ayurveda, if you took the Hinduism out, which is all vegetarian, if you took the Hinduism out of the medicine and it's in the original encyclopedias, the people who get meat on a regular is vata, because they run cold and dry. And meat is warm and juicy. You know, it's got healthy fats. It's got unhealthy fats too, so portion is everything. The idea of meat for anybody is going to be the palm of your hand to 2/3 veggies. So a meal should always be 2 angelis, a handful, 2 angelis. And your protein fits in the palm, and the rest fits in the rest of your hand. And it is mounded as we naturally mound our hands in shape. So Pitta's got to watch the oily food and too many chiles, you know. They're going for quick, so they're kind of like, I don't know, a burrito, and then it's like, that's just more Pitta. You know what I mean? Unless they make it themselves in the right way. But if you're going to a restaurant style burrito, I mean, you know, you're going to be getting oily and salty and gluten and dairy and all the things that sort of perpetuate inflammation, you know. I'm not saying I never eat a burrito. Not a hypocrite. I'm more of an enchilada girl, to be honest, but you know, it is something that you will notice, that you go to certain foods when you're feeling certain ways. Like in my body mapping class last week, I mentioned, you know, like if I am frustrated and I don't even know it, or I've had a really long day and I'm fired up about something, but maybe I'm just staying really clean in my heart, but then I leave and I'm just sort of like, man, that was a hard day, man. You know, I'm trying to stay clean, but it's just like, that was not easy. And it's funny how if we're going out to eat, you know, there's always the like Mexican food. So now it's kind of built into my relationship and into myself. If I'm craving Mexican food, I should probably step back and witness what my day looked like, because it's my pattern food. We all have it. It's my pattern food, where I'm actually pissed about something, or like overworked and like, God, I need a break, you know. And then it's not the right food. It just kind of makes me more frustrated or more fired up, and then I have more inflammation. So you'll have to kind of think about, what are your go-to foods? It doesn't mean you'll never eat them again, but you want to maybe eat them more consciously. You know, just eat them more consciously. Like, know what decision you're making, or give it a second thought. Sometimes I'm even like, no, I am going to Mexican food, but I'm saying no cheese, and I'm not getting this, and I'm getting a plate of cilantro and lime. But I'm going. You know what I mean? Like, how can I make this the healthiest choice? And that is using Ayurveda. Because I'm saying, how can I make this wanting I have a more balanced picture? Sometimes it's nice when the teacher puts themselves out on the chopping block, so you can kind of be all, oh, yeah, what is mine? We all have them, you know. Aloe vera juice, Pitta, aloe vera juice. It's called Kumari, which is the name of one of our drinks at the bar, because it's the most cooling to the liver. Liver is the epicenter of Pitta, fire. And that is a really common remedy. Now, you do want to get the inner fillet, which is what we sell in the store, but you just look for that word wherever you go. You do not want any of the outside peel or any of the yellow mucilage base that's on aloe. You want to rinse it and just get the pulp, which is called inner fillet, because that yellow has anthraquinones in it, which is laxative. So if you take the leaf out of the plant and just do the pulp, you have a pure, wet, hydrating, how do you put out a fire? Hydrating. So you have a hydrating bitter. So I'm super into bitters, and I am an herbalist, which is like the world of bitters for cooling down the body. But sometimes bitters alone can't do it, because bitters run dry. So if you've gotten so hot that you've gotten dry, a tincture may not get you where you want to go, whereas, you know, a cup of inner fillet aloe would be this wet, satiating, anti-inflammatory that would really serve a little bit more. So that's number one. And you know, half a cup daily is considered prevention for Pitta. If you know your Pitta, you know you eat those pitta foods, or you have those emotions in your life, or you just work crazy hard, and you know you have adrenaline, which is the hottest hormone in the body, you have to think, like, how am I gonna address this inflammation so I don't have a forest fire that starts spreading? Inflammation spreads. You know, that's how we end up with bacteria in our body. So that's kind of the kind of main focus and reason why you want that fire. You don't want to lose your fire, but you certainly don't want excess in the body. It's dangerous, just like in a house or in a forest. Food, the more recreational play, because you know pittas work themselves in the ground and they're like, I need a drink. You know what I mean? So the more recreational play that is not serving the pitta, they're the most common ones that go to that, like, now I gotta play, I work so hard, you know, then they really are gonna have to consider like raw diet. That's how we cleanse. And it's gonna be the coldest way you could go, so it's gonna cool them down the quickest. Now, getting a true pitta to take all the time it takes to be a raw foodist, that's another question to ask the client, because usually they don't have that much time. Raw food takes some time, you know, but there's a lot of raw foods you can buy right in the store too. But bok choy, snacking on cucumbers, like really being like, hey, don't go without water or food. Like, take a cucumber and some tahini to work. You know, like, just take some cucumber. And often I can't get pittas to just drink water because it's not exciting. There's no flavor. I cannot get them to drink water. So I have to put mint in it, or lemon balm, or lemon, or put something in it, cucumber slices. And if it has flavor and they love it, they're gonna go to things they love, because that's what drives them. Passion. So if they're passionate about that cucumber water, you're gonna get them drinking water. If it's just water, may not wanna do it. So I'm gonna make things exciting for pitta. So it's playful. And then kapha, when we look at this too, water and earth. Here's this idea of circulation, fluid, all things unctuous. I love this word. Juicy, nourished, pliable. Earth is in the instance like mud, so the downside for kapha would be heavy, dense, lacking flow, feeling sluggish and stagnant and congested. These are the primary times when you're like, yeah, I'm down. Now some people will be like, I'm so kapha on my day off because I'm a couch potato. Now that's a good word. That's like something that's heavy and sitting. So, you know, Vata sometimes will think of themselves as an airhead. I'm not saying these are positives, but it's interesting how we call these things out very appropriately. And then when you're really pitta, you're hot-headed or a road rager, which is so true. You know, they don't get very far, right? They're right in front of you at the light. You're like, pitta, patience. You didn't get very far. But they'll zip around you, right? Feeling that rage. Kapha does have that attached, heavy, you know, congestive, depressing, or what we think of as like the couch potato. Or the times when you're like, I'm such a couch potato, I'm just sitting here lazy all day. I want to maybe make a difference. If you only have one day off a week, and most people don't even have that anymore, most people don't even have a day off anymore. If you actually have a day off, and you're not just having days off all the time, some people have easy schedules, but that is probably emptiness that you're calling lazy. See what I'm saying? So actual couch potato or actual kapha excess is going to be you're depressive, you're recluse, you're congested. Maybe if you're sitting around all day and just eating kapha foods, you know, just eating bread and cheese and peanut butter out of the jar, or macaroni and cheese, and, which some days it looks very kapha like that, and then you know you're not content in life. Because kapha goes to food to look for contentment, which is why they end up gaining weight. Because they're about nourishment. They can't go without nourishment. So if they just gave themselves away for days on end, they may not be sitting there just all nothing. You're either really empty and exhausted and your body needs to literally sit on the couch and rest, because we're not resting anymore. Like, you know, sometimes I think we're beating ourselves up. Like someone will come and be like, I watched a movie at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on my day off. And I'm like, that's awesome! That's great! That means you surrendered. You didn't go and start weeding your garden and cleaning your cupboards and staying busy. You actually stopped for 2 hours. But they'll be saying it like it's guilty, you know, like a confession booth or something. So we're gonna have to look at our guilt relation in our society here. And like sometimes we're just empty and need to replenish and sit around and watch a movie. And then other times you'll have to know when you're not content and you are sluggish and you are feeling gunky, and that's when you're going for more heavy, gunky, dense foods, you know? So I want to just differentiate those because we're so depleted in calling ourselves kapha lazy, and that's not really fair to the amount of replenishment we need to just survive and be healthy. Okay, so kapha is this waterworks, and it is really, you know, it's I think I said it, but attachment, depression, melancholy, very low, heavy emotions. So they don't need the heavy food. They also do great on raw food. They're gonna have to exercise with raw food, like get their blood flow going, because if they are kind of sitting sluggish, they could already be cold. Or sometimes I'm not like, you need the raw kraut, I'm like, you need the kimchi kraut. I'm like, you need it spicy. Like usually kapha, I have to get them stirred. I have to stir the pot. There's mud in there. I gotta stir the pot. I gotta get them excited. I gotta spice up their life. So spices, 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 spices. Sometimes I won't even go straight for their go-to foods. Like I've had a lot of people who I'll change some foods and give some remedies, and they'll be like, you didn't tell me not to eat gluten. And I'll be like, well, do you think you need gluten? He's like, no, I don't think I need gluten. Well, then don't eat gluten. They're like, but you didn't say that. And I was like, well, I was telling you all your yeses. You know what I mean? I want to give you yes, yes, yes. So kapha has a lot of self-esteem issues. They're huge hearts, and they give themselves away, and they do it in service. So it's not even like a negative thing per se. They might give too much, but see what happens for them is they give and give and give, and they just give everything they got, and then they have nothing left. So they leave from work and they're like, I deserve some ice cream. So there's this contentment and this deserving because they gave so much. So you have to really pay attention to that food pattern that's really common here, because they do gain weight easy and then they feel horrible about themselves and they put all of their worth into their weight, which is so unfortunate. And they give up every part of themselves. They give up all of it for the sake that they feel a little heaviness. But they do have to be careful because they will kind of secretly eat, which is guilt eating. And they do lean towards the negative of hoarding, like materialism, you know, like shopping when they don't feel good, eating when they don't feel good. So they do have to really watch that balance. But you know, if you went to a kapha and said, you just need some exercise, they're like, tell me something I don't know. Like that's their whole, it's so hard for them to just get up and start moving their body. It's hard for them to be like, I'm not gonna eat that, I'm gonna eat a salad. You know, that's not easy. They get fixed in the heaviness. One of their main words is attachment. So they get attached to their picture even if it doesn't feel good to them. So I have to motivate this person. And when I'm feeling kapha, I have to motivate myself, you know, because eventually you could do this for other people by being, oh, you're pitta. I'm going to chill out for you and help you. You know, oh, you're vata. Let's sit down. You need grounding. Oh, you're kapha. Ooh, you need me to stir your pot a little. Let's take a walk and talk, you know. But sometimes I have to get them salt scrubbing at home first, like feeling their body. Kapha doesn't touch themselves because they don't love their bodies. So I need them touching themselves and salt scrubbing and moving their lymph and like getting into the areas they don't love. I'm like, where do you not love yourself? And someone will be like, my butt. And I'm like, you need to scrub your butt every day. And they're like, oh God. And I'm like, every day, take a scoop out of that jar and I want you to scrub your butt every day. I promise you in 2 weeks' time, your butt will not feel the same. It will be lighter and it'll feel lifted and you'll feel more control. You'll feel more embodied. So kapha leaves their body sometimes more than people think of. It's called avoidance. They avoid, and then they go into their body and they start looking and they're like, oh God, I don't like it in here. And they leave again. So they do a lot of avoiding their body, so I need them to touch themselves and connect to those places they don't love. Otherwise, there's no changing it. They'll just maybe diet, and wonder why they keep failing. And then they keep putting their eggs in the basket of self-worth. Like, I'm so dumb, I failed. So that's the thing with kapha. And part of that is social. We cannot deny that part of what I'm talking about in kapha is a social issue with, sort of what's the right body type and what's the wrong body type, And even our idea of a wrong body type is usually, in Ayurveda, usually what you would think of as a healthy body type. Interesting enough, So our idea of thin, perfect body is actually considered depleted body in Ayurveda. It's not considered healthy. It's the nerves are exposed and they're sensitive and you don't feel like you quite got enough protection and insulation. So there's a running cold, getting anxious, So we have to kind of really overcome some of our social norms to be able to really honor each one.